We are dreaming of a world without borders, of achieving the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals with a new breed of leaders who think borderless beyond the quick win now mindset. I am Lina, Executive and Leadership Coach. Together with Duncan Skelton, Catherine McGillivray-Pronto, and Tatiana Petrova, we believe that there is a way of relating that opens up understanding, belonging, transcendence, and possibility that removes unnecessary boundaries. Through monthly dialogues, we co-created the 6-part podcast series called Borderless, Discovering Borderless-Centred Leadership. These are unscripted live recordings with minimal editing centering around 4 principles: act now future-oriented, iterative and anticipatory, humanistic and interspecies, and say no to yes. Have a listen and join us in leading through a borderless lens. This is Lina. I'm very excited today to be here with Tatiana, Catherine, and Duncan on this 6th episode of the Borderless podcast series, Discovering Borderless-Centred Leadership. Across the series, we have explored the 4 Borderless-Centred Leadership, or BCL, principles: act now, future-oriented, iterative and anticipatory, humanistic and interspecies, say no to yes. And midway through, we reconnected with the why we got together on this concept of borderless-centred leadership. We believe there is a way of relating that opens up understanding, belonging, transcendence, and possibility that removes unnecessary borders. And throughout the series, each one of us kind of has a center theme. So I really appreciate that the anchoring piece about core values and the fluidity of the borders, the permeability, and then about this finite space, this planet that we are in, that we're in it together, but there's plenty for all of us. And I think that really is what Borderless-Centred leadership is about, to look at these elements. And for this episode, we will try to pull everything together, see what we have learned across the series. What does this actually look like in practice? Where do we go from here?
Beautifully said, Lina. So as I think about this, I am taken back to some of our earlier conversations. And really, for me, borderless-centred leadership begins when we look in the mirror every day. It begins on the inside as an inner practice. And so with that framing, some of the questions that come up for me are, what are the inner shifts that will happen? We're actively practicing borderless-centred leadership. What are those internal shifts? What are the habits that help us stay centered and anchored, using Catherine's words? What are the habits that help us stay anchored as we strive to make those shifts? And what are the things that derail us most easily? So in terms of the inner shifts, one of the inner shifts for me is about being intentional. In the noise and distraction, having a way to come back to this place of desire, of intention, to hold these principles. What's an inner shift required to practice BCL for you?
For me, it lives in the space of interconnectedness and moving away from ego, or softening my relationship with my own ego and opening up more towards relationships with others and with the bigger system. that I'm part of, which is infinitely larger and wiser than I am. And like many leaders, I was shaped by cultures where emphasis and reward is put on competence, clarity, having the right answer, being right, having the last word, and expertise, right? So I carried that expert achiever position through many spaces that I went through, and I was successful with that, right? So there are a lot of brownie points associated with that. And that's how I've learned to define success. And that's what I needed to dislearn. And I'm still kind of decommissioning that old habit. When I've realized that first I care for humanity more than I care for my own success. And by humanity, I don't mean like the whole civilization and everybody on this planet and all of that. Also, I do care about those things. But for me, humanity is much more intimate, daily connection from a person to person, from one heart to another. And I just discovered that I love it so much better than just being successful alone. That's one. But also I'm realizing that the problems or the challenges that we are facing and aspire to solve, where my purpose invites me, where my values invite me, those are spaces that just are not answerable to individual ego. They are much bigger, more complex, and require completely different response. And that's juicy enough for me to kind of start decommissioning the ego muscle. And I guess it's lifelong work. So I'm nowhere near kind of completion, saying yes, celebrated. But the joy is in the process. How about you?
Great. There's a lot of things that resonate with what I've been thinking, Tatiana. I think when you talk about shifting away from the ego, about how do I prove myself as a leader, it's more about, and I think maybe this is where the humanity bit comes in, is it's more about stewardship. What is needed here? What future am I helping to create? So moving from ego to stewardship would be one shift. And the other shift, which relates to what you were just saying as well, is shifting from control, wanting to be in control, to being present, and to rely on your values and your purpose, rather than wanting to be something that might not even be possible. So it's moving also from identity to essence. So rather than saying I am a manager, I am an expert, I am a decision maker, it's borderless-centered leadership is inviting us to lead from something deeper, as you were saying, Tatiana, which is about our values, our purpose, and what I sometimes call my inner flames. And I think also in our uncertain world, we have to give up the idea of certainty and be curious. And when we're leading across cultures, across generations, across perspectives, across borders, whatever they are, we can't assume that we already know the answer. So we have to be open and curious. So that's another shift for me in order to practice borderless-centered leadership.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's always that awareness and reminding myself. Curiosity is important. It's that that constant need to protect my own something. I think that goes along with the ego, and it goes along, be a little bit more curious. And one word that has been very important for me really was what Duncan has always said about abundance. There's plenty. There's enough for all of us. And then I find, that sense of hoarding or, we need more, I need more is the way to break that boundary, that borders. So that is a shift for me, to really remind myself that there is plenty around there, for all of us. So there is no one way to do things. There are many ways to do things. And when there is plenty, how do we even get even more than that? From how do we maximize what is already here? Because at the same time, it is paradoxical. The planet is really just that. And so there is, border or no borders. Our planet Earth is just that. But at the same time, it's regenerative. I believe in that, and I have to remind myself with that sense about regeneration, the regenerative aspect of where we are in this planet Earth, and to lead from that perspective becomes abundance, becomes borderless for me.
I want to try and distill what I've heard from your three responses. Fundamentally, if we're asking like, how do we resource ourselves to be more borderless-centered leaders, then it's about what capacity, what capability, what inner capacity do we need to lead in that way. What I hear here is a shift from identity and ego to essence, something around presence and identity, a lot of self-awareness, sort of detachment from ego, a lot of practice at staying open and present, even through discomfort and the uncertainty, kind of fueled by connection and compassion for self and for others. It takes a lot of courage to stay in the discomfort, a lot of systemic awareness. What we do here is connected and impacts beyond the people in the room. And fundamentally a sort of shift in belief from seeing the world as a place of scarcity to seeing the world as a place of possibility from abundance. So it feels like this is less about techniques and tools and more about who we are being as we are practicing borderless-centered leadership.
And that's a great comment. I think it is about being, and sometimes we need tools to do that, right? It's not something that comes easily. And in particular, when you work in organizations that are dealing with lots of different cultures and lots of complexity, constant change, people are under pressure, leaders are under pressure in the real world. And that doesn't make borderless-centered leadership easy. So what do you think? What pressures in organizations might push leaders away from these principles? I see one of them exactly to do with stewardship and long-term impact is a conflict with the reality of you're going into work every day and there are short-term performance expectations. That's one of the biggest pressures. And I know in my organization, one of the big focuses at the moment is speed. So people are rewarded for speed, for activity, for actions, for immediate results. And borderless-centered leadership is inviting leaders to think long-term, to think about their stewardship and their long-term impact. So this can create a tension when leaders must feel that they must deliver quickly. But at the same time, they have to care for people and systems and relationships and the planet. So that's one of the immediate things that comes to my mind. What about You.
I recognize what you're talking about, Catherine. Looking back at my corporate career, yes to speed, yes to the value of busyness. We often confuse busyness with progress. And heroic effort is often what gets rewarded in the organization. And then the other one is around commodification of relationships. Relationships are just so messy, and then we don't have time for it. Let's focus, let's get job done. So, and then there is this very comforting, but actually false assumption that everybody will just take their positions and play their part and nothing else will pop up, right? And of course, that's not how living systems operate. So we carry the banners of speed, efficiency, and full utilizations, like I'm busy, I'm running from one meeting to another, back to back, and that kind of gives me a special status, right? I'm that busy, I'm that utilized, I'm good, therefore, right? And under those banners, we kind of try to swipe under the carpet the messiness of the real relationships and the fact that it's human system after all. What is behind all of that? My gut feel is that idea of control and desire to control. And what, of course, drives our need for control is fear. So what is behind that? Focus on short-term metrics, on busyness of the agendas, on the desire for speed, on the irritation with emotional layers that mess up the quickest trajectory to result. Then I arrive at those two: desire for control and fear.
I spent more than 2 decades in international development. And while we all, when I was doing that kind of work, of course, we wanted things to happen quickly. We are talking about institutional change and structural change in a country. So, one example, that I was personally involved in at the beginning of the project and then at the end of it was the introduction of IT system, the ERP system, the enterprise resource planning system, to middle income country for their treasury department. It took 11 years. Just on the procurement of the system took 4.5 years. And I would say that who was actually leading that, had that borderless thinking that this is going to be good for the country eventually. And it is not that it is easier to just do it the old way, more manual driven. The reason that it took so long, it was the resistance. And the resistance is about change. Right now, we are doing okay. If you introduce something new to us, who knows if it will be the same. And that stuck with me. And I actually, my doctoral thesis was on that particular project. And the learning from it is about ownership. One of the artifacts from the research was about ownership. And if it takes time to feel that this is part of me, it's not something driven into me. Speed doesn't really cut it. It takes time to have that long-term view that this is important, and that is where borderless-centered leadership is then supports that long-term thinking.
You said speed right at the end there, Lina. Something about speed for me, like, that gets in the way of practicing borderless-centered leadership. One of the things I see, like practically speaking, when I meet with leaders, is they're in back-to-back meetings quite literally with no time at all. The moment one meeting ends, they should already be in the next one. And these things overrun, they arrive late to the next one, so on and so forth. So there's no space at all to stop and reflect and be curious. Like, to have that perspective of, like, what course correction is needed, like how are we tracking towards our goals, just that space for reflection, for taking perspective. Probably the single most reported thing I hear is, as a leader, saying, I don't have time enough to be strategic. So there's certainly no time to be reflective. How am I doing? Like, what is the impact I'm creating? How can I get those signals? Is the impact I'm creating intentional or unintended? Just that rush to be busy to deliver shareholder value in this quarter or the next quarter as a single measure. And what if there was a way to do it differently and to create better results with that as an important business focus? We know them as soft skills, but it's the people skills, the human relationship skills, being in connection with people. So lack of speed, I think, keeps people inside of this do mentality. I have things to do, I must do. And so the way I do things is the way I know how to do them, which is what I've learned from always doing them this way. And that space, when we get to create it, gives you some perspective. And you get to ask, not just, am I doing this right, but am I doing the right thing? Is there some other framing of this? What's possible if you slow down? And this is one of the barriers, is slowing down to get into conversation, to get into relationship with the smart people you've hired. What do they know that you haven't seen, that you're out of date with? How do you allow that space so that answers and proposals can emerge? Not that your ego takes ownership of them, but actually the answers come from other people. So what gets in the way of making BCL real in the world for me is slowing down enough to have the quality of conversations and the relationships where actually stuff emerges that's way better than you're achieving today in this rush.
This reminds me so much of the statement that, it's a quote from Viktor Frankl. And he said that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
What disempowers people to choose slowing down? What is it that actually prevents people from slowing down in that context?
As I hear that, I'm kind of stumbling over it and reframing it. Slowing down feels bad when we have to execute and deliver more sooner. Maybe if I hear slowing down, and I'm sort of framing it as creating space. What if we don't need for leaders to slow down? What if we need leaders to have space to do the work that leaders should be doing more of? How do you open up that space? Not necessarily slowing down, but how do you open the spaciousness to do this type of work, to shift from doing to thinking and being?
We just talked about what makes BCL hard in the real world and require courage and bravery and disruption, productive disruption, to actually step into a different modus operandus. Why might borderless leadership be particularly necessary now? There are these climate and sustainability transitions that require attention. There are polarization and identity conflicts and actually wars in the world. There is technological disruptions that many people don't understand. And so there are lots of very, very complex challenges that we face, and the stakes are high.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels that way, that as a humanity, as a species, what got us here will not get us to resolving the problems that we are facing right now if we just continue business as usual. What is it that the world asks of us as leaders these days, and why borderless-centered leadership might be an answer?
From my perspective, I see that there's a lot of complexity. I think we all know that there's a lot of complexity, and the traditional way of being a leader is just not enough anymore. So more and more I see in my organization, more and more of our work happens across cultures, across geographies, across perspectives. And it means that you have to be better at collaborating across the systems, that the systems are deeply interconnected and at the same time very fragile. And there has to be some kind of glue. And I think that's where borderless-centered leadership becomes particularly relevant, because borderless means being able to work across our differences, across our cultures, our identities, our disciplines, our worldviews. Means that we have to be curious, we have to be humble, we have to be willing to listen, be challenged. And it's not enough to just be borderless. We also need to have this center, which I've said throughout, this strong sense of purpose and values and inner clarity. And if you don't have that, you're not able to have the right impact, or the impact that you want to have, because you become reactive, you become overwhelmed, you get pulled into lots of different directions, as we've just been saying. So I believe that what the world needs now, and that's how borderless-centered leadership can help us, is to be able to hold both, to be open to the world, to be curious, and be anchored in yourself, be able to stay present in uncertainty, be able to bridge differences, and see yourself not as a controller of the system, but rather as a steward of the system, of the future that we're creating together. So it's, I believe this approach is about leading in a way that matches the complexity of the world that we're now living in.
Why might borderless-centered leadership be particularly necessary now? There are complex systems, and when you poke the system, there are emergent properties, there are outcomes that are generated that we could never anticipate or guess. The systems are global, like we are fundamentally in relationship and interconnected and interdependent, as our supply chains are clearly demonstrating. For me, this takes me to being connected and relational, not having answers, being open to co-creating something that we're not in control of, because actually we never were.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And not to embrace the interconnectedness of us all, including all the species around us, is short-sighted. And Duncan, you talk about the supply chain. I also wonder, the whole globalization that started, decades ago. Is there another system? This is also, is an interesting thing that I remember my dad, said that why wouldn't just one factory would do everything? Are we at an inflection point to do something else?
So what I'm hearing is this theme of interconnectedness and interdependency now, and also a very clear sense of shared future, where we are codependent in a very powerful way. We together impact whether that future actually exists or not. And therefore, adaptability that is required lives within relationships and co-creation rather than individual powerful answer. It's about power with rather than power over.
So there's an inquiry that that presents itself here. I want to offer each of us. Where am I holding an inner border that's limiting my leadership today? One inner border that I have is a sense that as I go about doing my work in the world, I want to get value from that. I want to get paid so it can sustain me in bringing more of this good work to people. And I have the sense of what I really want to do and have been doing here is working with other people, collaborating on bringing work. And then I have this belief, this border, this barrier that says the more people I work with, the smaller amount of money I take from the effort. So while my heart wants to lead and create and deliver with other people, my sort of accountant brain is going, yeah, but if you do this by yourself, then you get paid more money or you have to charge more if you involve more people, and then people won't want to pay that. So there's a money, I guess it's a bit of a scarcity mindset here around money and value and payment that I'm in my entrepreneurship still wrestling with. It's a barrier there for me.
It's interestingly, I'm listening to you, Duncan, and actually before you even started talking, I've been thinking about this, that, I totally embrace the idea of borderlessness. And I find myself not there yet. And I can't quite say, I sort of like intuitively, I know what I need to be, but I find myself not there yet. And I think trust is the thing that I don't know if I trust myself to just let go. Do I trust those around me, my environment, to be ready? And what do I need to be to get to that point? So these are questions I'm actually asking myself. So, so up here, in my rational mind, it's like these are the principles. And we are going to, I'm going to embrace that. And then in practice, it is not that simple. Back to, back a few episodes back, I think it was Catherine talked about the yoga practice. I'm doing my yoga practice and I'm wobbly. And I'm still practicing. And I think that's what it is. Just continue to, so it is not like black and white. This is how you do it. It is a practice. It's continuing holding that in myself. Think borderless. What does it mean in this particular situation? And I think that is the shift for me.
For me, I am constantly reminded that 1 + 1 equals a better one. And every day I'm reminded that I get better results by involving other people and trusting other people, including other people, and breaking down my border, which is that I'm the eldest of 5 children and I have to sort it out for myself. And some very bad leadership advice that my father gave me, which is, if you want something done properly, do it yourself. So these two borders really dragged me down. But luckily, every day I'm reminded that whenever I break down that barrier of involving someone, of asking someone for help, asking for support, or just asking for a different perspective, then I get something much better. And so that for me would be the border that I have to break down every day, the inner border every day. It's not easy, even with age.
I recognize all of that. That's part of being human, right? For me, the daily practice is becoming courageous enough to step out of the comfort of self-serving. Duncan, you've talked about money. I get that. So that's how nourishment is usually expressed in our world. But for me, it's also energy. Right? So where my energy goes and how wide I actually allow it to flow. We've talked about it before in conflict. That can be both very explosive distraction factor, but can be an incredibly powerful source of growth. So the latter requires holding both truths as equal, my truth and my needs, and the truth and the needs of the other person. And when I am resourceful, that's easy. That's beautiful, right? And you can pat yourself on the shoulder and say, oh, look, I've practiced hard and long, and here it is, beautiful fruits of that effort. But when I am not resourceful, and when self-preservation takes the driver's seat, there is this choice, explicit or unnoticed, whether I am serving myself, which is sometimes necessary and the right thing to do, or I'm serving a wider system, and how wide that system is. Is it just my immediate family? Is it broader communities that I'm part in? Am I engaging with bigger world challenges in a way that I'm prepared to offer service into or not, right? It's a constant choice that we are invited to make.
So I'm hearing recurring theme here. It's a practice. Borderless-Centred leadership is a practice. There's some principles. We can continue to add to it or fine-tune it, but it's a practice. And we all have a different way of practicing it. The resulting efforts or the resulting, well, the results, in short, can be different. But there is that stewardship part, that future, that the reason that we are doing this. It is sometimes we want that quick win. We want that paycheck. We want that our immediate family is doing well. But in the bigger picture, it is that we are just stewards of this environment, this ecosystem, this planet Earth. And there are many things, and that's why initially my anchoring piece was the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Because those are the cross-border themes and challenges, and they are unifying for all of us across the globe. So what are some of the collective learning we have? How do we continue this conversation beyond this episode?
I would really invite those who listened in and with whom the themes in these episodes resonated to reflect on what borderless-centered leadership means to them. And what are the leadership practices that help them to move on a daily basis, however small, from a very enclosed and bordered space into that anchored and open space where borders are permeable and possibility is abundant. And maybe share what it translates into in their world and in their practice. So inviting feedback and inviting conversation. We kind of explore this topic in the conversation between four of us. None of us had readily prepared cooked answers when we started. We just talked our way into it, connecting with what matters most to us individually and collectively. And that's how this theme emerged. So one of the ways for me that is very fruitful and kind of stirs my curiosity is if we broaden that circle of a conversation.
Yes to that. For me, in my background in technology, this series of conversations is like a progressively loading JPEG. So you load a web page and you get that one blurred image that in several passes sort of resolves into clarity and precision. And I feel like I'm at the first pass and I've got several more scans of this JPEG to do. Having these conversations with a broader audience in person, getting more clarity enough to write and provide tools and structures for people to use. I think this is the beginning. I look forward to what resolves into detail next for us and for Borderless-Centred Leadership.
Agree with all of that, and I would like to close with a message of hope, really, because we've shared so many ideas and we've gone into a lot of different directions. I think we all need to digest again some of the thoughts that we've shared. And what gives me hope is that I see people or leadership that's changing. I do see that leadership is changing, and that leaders want to show up more in relationship with each other. They do want to listen more deeply. They are open to learning across cultures and disciplines. They're also open to asking bigger questions about the future that we want to create together. I see that in younger generations and also in older generations. And I see that there is a stronger sense of purpose that's emerging, a stronger sense of responsibility and interconnectedness. And so I want to, for me, I'm taking away a message of hope that what we've been talking about is not a utopia. It's something that's already real. It's something that's already starting. And it's something that we can already live on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't require us going on an MBA or an EMBA or a PhD or anything like that. It's something that we can really do on a daily basis. And just, you don't have to use the term borderless-centered leadership, but just know what it is and know what it brings and know how to put it to use. in however small ways you can.
None of us had the answers when we started. We talked our way into them, and there are more passes still to come. This is a first season, not a final word. The conversation is open and it gets richer the more people join it. If something in this series resonated, bring it into your next conversation, your next decision, your next moment of leadership. That's where it becomes real. This is Borderless. Thank you for listening.